Welcome back. I'm Conan Smith. I'm the president and CEO at the Michigan Environmental Council, and this is our flood-proof webinar. We host these once a season, along with our partners at the Sierra Club and Michigan League of Conservation Voters. And what we're trying to do this year is talk about President Trump and his administration, what they are doing to dismantle environmental protections and sow doubt and confusion by eliminating access to information. They're laying off federal employees, both here in Michigan and across the nation. They're withholding funding for critical programs like energy efficiency, renewable energy. They're really taking us backwards to a time when our cities couldn't sustain themselves against the onslaught of pollution and smog, times when our rivers caught on fire. And many of us have been left treading water in this deluge of disastrous news. Some of us are treading through literal water too. I can tell you just recently, my street flooded so badly that I watched 4x4 planks float down my street, take a hard right turn along the park, and flow to someone else's street. I was shocked, but this is the place that we live nowadays. Climate change continues to get worse, and those are some of the kinds of things that we see on a daily basis now. Unfortunately, our federal government is abrogating its responsibility to do more and better things about this. We're struggling to make sense of this world and what we can do about it. How can we dam a flood? How can we repair the kind of damage that has been done? And this is where Flood Proof comes in, this webinar series. Today, we have, again, three really fantastic, insightful leaders of Michigan's environmental movement to help us understand what is going on here. Our own Charlotte Jameson, our Chief Policy Officer at the Michigan Environmental Council, whom I have not seen enough this summer. Charlotte, great to hang with you again. Tim Minotis from the Sierra Club. He is the Deputy Legislative and Political Director for the Michigan chapter here. And Bentley Johnson, the Federal Government Affairs Director for the Michigan League of Conservation Voters. Bentley, welcome back as well. I am super excited to have another chance to talk with you about this stuff. It is it's so hard for so many of us out there, and I'm really grateful to get insights from you and guidance and hopefully a small sense of hope. Bentley, Tim, Charlotte, audience members, we're going to spend about 45 minutes wading through the environmental threats our federal government has wrought upon our state's air, water, and the places we love. We're going to show how its decisions impact the state's people and places, how we are and should be protecting ourselves, and how we come together to aid the cause. People in attendance, please feel free to leave any questions or comments in the chat or in the Q&A tab. We have staff who are monitoring, and we will we'll do our best to incorporate your live commentary into the discussion and into the Q&A after. At the end of this webinar, we will send out a recording. That is our typical process. And if we don't get to your question during the course of this webinar, we'll do our best to answer it in that follow-up email. So let's jump right in. Charlotte, Tim, Bentley, before we begin, let me just check in. How are each of you doing? How are you feeling since we last talked in the spring about this stuff? Charlotte, how's life?
I feel like I'm in this weird space of like, personally, things are good and I'm not being super impacted as of yet, which I guess is like par for the course for who I am. But like, then you check the news or hear about some new thing that the Trump administration has done, and it feels like this cognitive disconnect of just like horrible things happening and misery. I think I'm still struggling with that balance of just like you can't feel awful all of the time, but a lot of really horrible things are happening in the US and in the world. And so it's just um you want to not ignore them and acknowledge about, how things are going badly. So I don't know. It's tough. It's tough.
Bentley, I think about you a lot. Like you have that federal role, so you have the grand misfortune of dealing directly with the federal government. How are you holding up?
Yeah, I gotta say, part of my job is following the news, reading the news, and
Oh,
I get angry. I mean, I think that's the most thing is it's really easy to slip into this anger and frustration. What really helps is getting together with people that are determined to make a positive change. And I was reminded actually at a Michigan Environmental Council gathering recently that now is not the time to despair, and now's the time to really double down. And I needed that, I
oh,
needed that fellowship with people, and to be reminded that we're gonna be there's no cavalry coming. We're gonna be the ones to pull us out of some losses that we've had, not the least of which is the budget reconciliation bill that really is the most anti-environmental bill in history. So that one hurt, but we're even more determined going forward.
Tim, the Sierra Club, you and your allies are the folks in Michigan who probably have your fingers most directly on the pulse of Michigan and Michigan citizens. You're out there with your chapter leaders. Like how are you and the club members hanging through all this?
Honestly, I mean, first and foremost, I think with all the doom scrolling, hearing about something new every day, we had the budget reconciliation, then you hear about like the roadless rule, and then the endangerment finding, and all these actions that are just like day after day. But one thing that is an honor and a privilege and like actually keeps me grounded and sane is being able to do this work for a living. I think,
Mm,
being, on the front line in the field, doing this work day in and day out, and working with like-minded folks who share that passion, has really been helpful in getting me through this. And so much credit to, our members and stakeholders like MEC and LCB and the amazing staff that I get to work with every day at your organizations. It really keeps me sane. And so it is an honor and privilege to do this work, because without it, I mean, I feel like I would just be in a major headspin. But with our membership, what I am seeing and hearing from our members now is that they are more motivated than ever before right now. They want to be meeting with lawmakers. They at all levels of government, our local elected officials, our state, our federal, they want to be in the advocacy action, right in the thick of it. And that is something, we being an advocacy organization, obviously, is one of the key components in being a grassroots organization. But from the past couple months, from what I have been seeing and hearing from our members, is that they are more motivated than ever. And every day they're asking, what can I do? How can I help? What kind of advocacy needs to be done? How, what organizing? And so I would say, even in the doom and gloom of things right now, I think our membership and what I'm seeing on the ground is folks being more motivated than ever, to do what they can to, um, keep us moving forward, but also pushing back against all the negative things that we are seeing. And so people are really wanting to be the change they wish to see in the world right now. And so it's a really heartwarming thing to see. And so, yeah, our membership is ready to go.
I have to say, as much as like we have been slammed with things that I thought were impossible that we would never see. We're really blessed here in Michigan to have the opportunity to go outside, put our feet on the ground, put our hands on the very things that we are fighting to protect. And of course, a Michigan summer is the perfect time to do all that. The lakes, the woods. It has been really restorative for me to get out in some of those places and renew the energy for the fight because it's big. It's big and it's ugly. It was most recently a budget reconciliation at the federal government. In our previous webinar, We talked about that sort of whole host of environmental rollbacks and budget cuts that we thought we might see. But since then, we've actually gotten a lot of them, and a lot of them have been in the most recent big ugly bill, as we call it. Bentley, as the federal affairs guy, can you remind people, like, what is that bill? What is budget reconciliation generally? How did we get through all of this to the point where now we have statutory authority behind some of the horrendous things that the president had predicted would come true?
Yeah, so bottom line, this budget reconciliation bill, or the big ugly bill, as a lot of people have been calling it, was essentially the Republicans' budget and tax bill. This is the vehicle that they wanted to really kick off this year and this legislative session, with getting as many of their sort of tax and spending priorities passed in one giant package, at one time. And so top on that list, and so the top on that list was extending and handing out tax cuts really to the ultra wealthy. I mean, it most benefits the ultra rich that don't need these handouts, and then it slashes all sorts of things to pay for that, and it doesn't even pay for all of that. In fact, it blows a hole in our national deficit to the tune of $3.4 trillion over the next 10 years, which is the most by any piece of legislation in a long time. So, but why, I think it's worth reminding ourselves, why did they use this budget reconciliation process? That's a little hard to understand. And the bottom line is, you can use reconciliation to push through your policy goals with only a simple majority in the Senate. Because for the vast majority of legislation in the Senate, you need 2/3, or you need 3/5, and you need 60 votes. So a reconciliation bill allows them to pass, a huge, massive bill with just that simple majority in the Senate. And with margins so close in the House and Senate, it was even difficult to put together a bill that could, satisfy all the different factions in the Republican Party. But they did get it done in the end. And the result is the most harmful and certainly the most anti-environmental piece of legislation in history. And we'll get into the details, about that. But I think it really is a testament to the process by which they use budget reconciliation, is a testament to actually how unpopular these policies were and are, as they rammed them through. By putting it into one giant package, it's overwhelming to try to explain what's in it, and for the average person who's dealing with their everyday life to understand what's in it. What we've seen through the process and since the bill being passed and enacted into law is that when people find out about it, it's extremely unpopular. And so I think one of the things that we need to remember throughout this whole conversation tonight is that the people that are on this webinar are more in the know about this stuff than the average person. We have to continue to talk about it. We have to continue to educate people and define what's really in it. And so not only, and I would just say, we'll get into more of this, but not only is it the most anti-environmental bill, it really guts and destroys our social safety net that we've built up, and as part of what has made the United States of America a great place to live and a place where you can have a fair shot. Things like the Medicaid program to make sure that people can get care. Things like SNAP nutritional food benefits, and many other programs were gutted in this bill. And so we'll talk a lot about, of course, the environmental impacts, the impacts to pollution, to energy costs, throughout this webinar. But we should absolutely remember that they, over the next 10 years, are looking to cut a lot of these programs to the bone, and that really sets the framework for funding decisions going forward, at least for the next couple of years here.
Bentley, I remember there was some dissonance in the Republican Party because these kinds of cuts for small government people seem necessary because they want to shrink the deficit and ultimately the debt. But that goal was left on the altar as well. That we didn't actually cut the spending. We just cut the programs. Are you feeling some angst from the right in the Capitol about that failure?
Yeah, I mean, I think it shows the power that Trump has really over the Republican Party right now. There was lots of grumbling about this bill that was out in public, was being reported on in private. Lots of problems that Republicans had with this. There were even, it's so rare to see Republicans even say a nice thing about clean energy. There were a block of Republicans that were signing onto letters that were talking about the importance of preserving the clean energy programs, the clean energy incentives that were bringing hundreds of thousands of jobs into districts, the majority of which were Republican red districts. In the end, though, they swallowed their concerns to really pass and Trump's priorities. I should say that in addition to the tax cuts, a lot of the spending in this bill that blows a hole in the deficit is for the president's immigration and military spending priorities. So that had a ton of investment, and it really shows where President Trump's priorities are. And it was really, I think, the talk about they tried some budget gimmicks to hide some of the cost and some of the effect on the deficit. But all the independent agencies and organizations that really do the calculations on what the impact of the budget was, they concluded, yeah, this is going to blow a hole in the national deficit. So really the talk about, I think, from my perspective on the right around the deficit is really hollow when it comes to pay attention to the actions and the votes and the actual result of this here. But there were lots of problems with it, and people swallowed those problems when it came time to push the button on how they were going to vote.
So, in large part, this is a tax bill as much as it is a spending bill. We're talking about funding programs. We're also talking about eliminating the funding that used to underpin many of those programs. Michigan is not going to be spared from this. We are heavily reliant, as most states are, on federal government for key environmental programs, but also for the social safety net. Charlotte, in addition to Inflation Reduction Act funding cuts, which are going to impact our state budget directly, what else is out there? What are we going to be feeling at the state level, and how is that implicating state budgetary debates and discussions that are going on currently?
Yeah, so this is one of the less, I think, well understood aspects of the impact of the ugly bill on Michigan and on likely other states. And I know Bentley and Tim are going to get into sort of more the concerns we have around cuts to IRA and clean energy programs and cuts to public lands, but there's a very real impact on state budgets. And here in Michigan, we have a constitutional requirement to have a balanced budget. We, unlike the federal government, cannot carry a deficit. And for many years, I remember 2019, the Environmental Council's former CEO, Chris Kolb, who was then the budget director, gave a presentation to the state legislature, the House and Senate Appropriations Committees, looking at sort of the state of our economy and our budget. And the trend lines on our general fund, which is the fund that can go to support a myriad of different programs. It's not restricted to one specific program. The trend on our general fund was like that. We were not raising revenue. We were so our general fund is like declining over time, and that has very real impacts on any programs that the state funds. This ugly bill will sort of supercharge that problem. So we're headed into this budget negotiation at the state level, already operating under pretty tight limits, but we did have at least a slight uptick in revenue to kind of like play around with and fund some really important programs. But with the ugly bill's impacts, we're now looking at over $1 billion deficit from where Governor Whitmer's sort of budget recommendations were. And that comes from the ugly bill increases the cost sharing within two of the safety net programs. So Medicaid and SNAP, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. So the cost sharing is the amount of money that the states have to put forward in order to draw down federal dollars. So now in order to maintain those programs, we'll have to put up more money, which again, we will go to the general fund to do because where else are you going to get that money from? And then it makes favorable tax changes to certain business expenditures. And the Citizens Research Council of Michigan estimates that those changes will have about a close to $700 million revenue reduction for this coming fiscal year in Michigan. So again, overall 1.1 billion potential shortfall or sort of like revenue below what the governor was expecting for this upcoming fiscal year. And then going forward, it's likely that the ugly bill is going to absorb around 40% of our expected general fund revenue growth out into the 2030s. So huge impact. And we're in Michigan, similar to the federal government, our fiscal year ends at the end of September. We don't even have House budgets from the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, and we're real behind the eight ball. And so this just adds, flame to the fire, essentially, in terms of those budget negotiations at the state level. And I think sets up the House Republicans to make some pretty drastic demands in terms of cuts to programs that we all depend upon. So I'm pretty worried about it. And I did want to just make sure we were underscoring that kind of state impact from the federal changes.
Can you put one of you put in context the size of the general fund and what $1 billion means this year?
Ooh, I can look it up. I don't know it off the top of my head. I don't know if anybody else does, but I can pull it up while you talk to Bentley and Tim about other impacts from the ugly bill.
Yeah, that'd be helpful because I think one of the things that we forget about is like the state has a set of its own priorities that now are going to be in direct competition with things that used to be funded by the federal government, and that's going to be a real challenge for us. Some of our programming in the state of Michigan is not it is protected. It has dedicated funding sources, which is really great. We think about the Natural Resources Trust Fund, which Tim does an enormous amount of good for public lands in this state, and it has a dedicated revenue source. But there are other programs that have been heavily dependent on direct support from the federal government and are getting hammered. So, Tim, can you talk a little bit about what's happening with public lands as a result of the passage of the Big Ugly Bill?
Yeah, absolutely. And, Conan, you reminded me earlier when we were talking about how we were feeling the importance of like staying grounded and how we are lucky to have like plentiful and beautiful natural resources here in terms of helping us stay rejuvenated. And Sierra Club's mission, explore, enjoy, and protect this planet, living out that ethos there. But to your point, unfortunately, though, one of the most devastating impacts of this law will fall on America's forests. And it's likely to create a huge, ugly mess for our public lands. And so I do want to give some quick kudos, though. Environmentalists, outdoor enthusiasts, including hunters and fishermen, did an amazing job. And it just shows the power of consistent advocacy and using your voice. We were able to block a proposal from Senator Mike Lee of Utah that would have outright sold off millions of acres in 11 Western states. So, that is important. But to be clear, while the outright sell-off is gone and was taken out of that bill, the bill still directs many other provisions that are equally as destructive. The bill still directs a study to sell off public land for housing. For example, it forces the government into a 20-year timber sale contracts, essentially turning over vast swaths of our public lands to private corporations. And I mean, that's not conservation, that's privatization, right? And so the new law sets aggressive timber harvesting goals and slashes hundreds of millions of dollars for ecosystem protection, wildlife prevention, and climate resilience. And then, further spending cuts for the Forest Service and Bureau of Land Management. For example, nearly $300 million in cuts to the National Park Service. So that means longer lines, less maintenance, fewer visitor services, and less safe access to the very places that belong to all of us. And so, again, and starting in 2026, it orders an unprecedented expansion of logging. And so what we are seeing out of this bill is quite honestly a cynical effort to divest and transfer federal public lands to the states and really private interests. And so, and our forests, again, aren't the only target. It attacks environmental and disaster protection by dismantling NOAA's coastal resilience funding that helps protect people from climate-fueled storms. And then, again, the law also mandates oil and gas leasing in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, and it requires drilling in Western states and Alaska, opens up millions of more in the Gulf of Mexico to extractive industries. And so overall, taken together, this is just a bad law for our public lands and natural resources. And it's just one of the most sweeping attacks on our natural heritage. And so to kind of paint a Michigan picture here too, is that Michigan, I mean, outside of our national parks, I mean, Michigan is home to nearly 3 million acres of national forests, here on Manistee, the Ottawa and Hiawatha. I mean, these aren't just timberlands. They are habitats for wildlife. They filter water for the Great Lakes. They sustain hunting, fishing, and outdoor recreation traditions that really define our state. And again, that $300 million in cuts, just the National Park Service alone, that is, again, threatening maintenance, education, visitor services at places like Sleeping Bear Dunes, Pictured Rocks, Isle Royal. I mean, these aren't just parks, they are cornerstones to our economy and our identity. And so, our forests and our Great Lakes are central to our state's health. And so seeing the weakening and the selling off of our land, especially if you take into the weakening of environmental reviews under NERIPA, our National Environmental Policy Act. This means more runoff, more habitat destruction, more risk to our Great Lakes watershed. And so there's with the swath of public lands and the connection between, federal funding into our state DNR, there's a lot at stake for the state of Michigan here.
I was really distressed by the little known areas that got slashed in this process. For example, you mentioned, Tim, the NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration cuts. And sometimes we think about the oceans as being the focus of that body, but we have some of the most expansive coastline in the United States, and we rely so heavily on Michigan, on NOAA for weather predictions, for data analysis, much of which is for us like directly connected to climate change, right? Like the health of Lake Erie and the extent of algal blooms that we experience there. Like, how do we keep that data intact? How do we track that? How do we predict it? And those are impacts not just on natural resources and environment, but also on our marine economies, right? Like the fishing industry in Michigan. So we're gonna be really surprised, I think, by the extent of these impacts and how they start to manifest, and how it tackles all of us. Bentley, we made such amazing progress in the last administration on energy and climate issues. The Inflation Reduction Act for sure, but also the Infrastructure Act, investing billions, trillions of dollars in a better future for us. What's at stake there, and how's that shaping up?
Yeah, I mean, those laws that you mentioned combined are a huge jumpstart for the clean energy transition that is already underway. And I don't want to get it twisted. Like, the transition to clean energy is happening, and I believe will happen.
Yeah.
But this Republican, budget bill, the big ugly bill, really hurts the momentum, because it really went out to try to gut the renewable energy industry, full stop. And so this is really payback, but for Trump and the Republicans, for their big polluter folks that are cutting paychecks, and the people are going to suffer. And so getting into some of those impacts, experts are predicting that residential electricity bills could rise dramatically. Our energy bills are already too high. We're already seeing rate increases. They could rise 10%. I've seen different modeling showing between $160 increase here in Michigan to up to $400 more annually over time. It takes away funding for home energy efficiency, make our projects that can make our homes healthier, safer, lower energy costs, and more comfortable. Five Lakes Energy has taken a look at the bill and said Michigan energy projects could just likely to cost 25% more after passage. DTE estimated that the incentives that they had before and that they lost would have saved 1.2 billion. Yeah. And guess what? Those tools would help people really save money. And this is on top of losing, like I said before, the Medicaid benefits. There's even energy benefits that the big ugly bill goes after, or within SNAP and some of those other social welfare programs. So it really targets low income households, vulnerable households. And it's really, and if that wasn't enough, they're even cutting funding and taking away funding for monitoring and reducing pollution in schools. And these are all things that Michigan has really gone after. Michigan has positioned itself to, the state of Michigan has positioned itself to go after grant programs that can reduce pollution locally and bring new projects to Michigan. And the clean energy industry, the private industry was really looking at Michigan, and I hope still is, as a place where you can build a clean energy industry. And by some measures, we were the top state in terms of bringing in investment and projects. In some measures, we were the second state bringing that in. And the estimates for losing those jobs are Michigan is going to face an estimated 17,000 direct job losses by 2030, and then potential impacts to over 226,000 jobs along the supply chain. And so our labor unions and our workers are really concerned about this. And we're also, in addition to the jobs themselves, losing training programs critical to that workforce development. These home energy efficiency programs that have to be done locally, go into a home, weatherize, add insulation, improve, electrify homes. All that stuff has to be done locally through different partnerships, and they're really trying to yank the rug out from under us on that. And that's on top of, just the Trump administration actions separate from the big ugly bill. They are going after projects that have already been announced, already been awarded, like the Solar for All program, which Michigan had really positioned itself well, had gone out and competitively got 156 million, and had already started putting money on the ground for projects like, solar on a 60 unit building that houses senior citizens in Oakland County, adding solar panels and energy storage to 12 homes in a community building in Chippewa County, which was spearheaded by the Intertribal Council of Michigan. A ground-mounted solar array at Hillsdale County Airport. Just really local benefits that people of all backgrounds in red towns and districts, in blue and purple, people were going after this money, and now it's being, had the cold water thrown on it. And so it means that localities have to step up, the state has to step up, and private industry needs to step up until we can change the politics, which we will do.
So Bentley, um, the onslaught of any new administration, right, is to capture the energy of its base and apply it as aggressively as it can in the first 100 days. And then there's the fallout, right? Like things happen and people realize, oh, where are my SNAP benefits? What happened to the support that I thought I was going to get for my energy bill, that sort of thing. That's going to become reality on the ground. There are future budgets that have to get passed. Like this is not the end. What is it going to look like, do you think, in Washington, D.C.? Are there going to be more bipartisan negotiations as the impacts of this start to get felt? Do we face shutdowns? Like what's the scuttlebutt about the next set of negotiations?
Well, we're coming up, just like here in the state, we're headed into some major negotiations, like you said, around the year-to-year appropriations. That's funding the government for that next fiscal year. So by the end of September, Congress has to take action to pass legislation that will fund government programs for 2026. And the question is, and if they're following the leadership or the non-leadership, in my opinion, of President Trump, he put out a budget proposal earlier this year that was disastrous. We're talking over a 50% cut for the Environmental Protection Agency, and doing things like basically trying to get rid of the National Weather Service, and just some incredibly egregious things. Things are that out of step even for previous Congresses that have put together appropriations bills that have slashed funding. So we are coming down to the wire. I think there's some uncertainty over the posture of Republicans and Democrats alike heading into this negotiation. I think what's clear is what's needed from for these members to hear back home is that, yeah, the EPA is doing some harmful things. They've got a fossil fuel shill at the helm in Lee Zeldin, but their mission is still to protect the environment and protect health, and they need a healthy budget to do that. So we do need to be making that case. I think not to get too far into it because a lot of it is just like rumor and just kind of what's being they're not back yet from August recess, but Republicans are looking to potentially lock in funding levels from this past year, from fiscal year 2025, kind of the current funding levels, which I think some people are uncomfortable with because of the cuts that have been made and the inadequacy of funding levels. And so there's things being thrown out like bringing earmarks back for these continuing resolutions to try to win over members that, you know, might be unhappy with just keeping funding levels as is, which is pretty low.
Nothing like a bribe.
Right, exactly. I think Democrats are, I would expect Democrats to be in the mindset of, we just need to be pointing out the harms. And this is an opportunity to show what's at stake for people. And we need to be also trying to win some sideboards and some protections that really holds the Trump administration accountable for essentially ignoring what Congress has said about funding to this point and kind of doing their own thing and clawing back funding, canceling grants, freezing grants, and not essentially making sure that Congress is just not a rubber stamp for the Trump administration. But we'll see how that plays out. And regardless of the posturing, as much as it seems like Congress ignores the people these days, it really does matter. I think Tim pointed out that a key provision that was going to sell off public land was removed because of the blowback that members got, including Republicans. So we still have a voice. We need to make it loud and proud. And if we can get through this tough period, there's maybe hope and kind of hold the line as much as possible. There's maybe hope at, a light at the end of the tunnel that we can, kind of not lose some of these incredibly important programs and make sure that they don't privatize all these public benefits that we get through all the things that we talked about, the National Weather Service, et cetera.
Tim, you gave us a ray of hope about logging. Advocacy can work, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I mentioned it earlier and Bentley just highlighted, like, thanks to grassroots advocacy, we were able to fight back to remove provisions that would have forced the sale of public lands. Some other things we were able to fight back, an implementation of a tax on wind and solar energy, as well as a provision to end emission standards for vehicles, which is under attack in a different way at the agency level. But we were able to get some other key things removed from that bill because of that significant grassroots advocacy and pushback. And so, these are significant wins, and we should celebrate them. Obviously, with these improvements, it's still a terrible bill that fails the American people in every way possible, but it does show that advocacy does work, and we must continue to advocate even when we lose. Yeah. Continuing to fight for our future is the only way we can build the movement. We need to push back against these policies on both a national and local level and hold our elected officials who support them accountable. And so this isn't about political party or affiliation. This bill all around is an anti-American bill, and it should be something, no matter what side of the aisle we affiliate with, should be absolutely concerned about. And so again, It's critically important, even when we feel like we're down in the dumps and we're losing all the time. The continuation to fight it is a must and is necessary for us to build that movement we need. And again, these few things, while they may seem small, when we are able to raise our voice and join together, we and develop that pushback, we can achieve those victories.
It's such a great point, Tim. Like we might lose in a vote on the floor with this Congress, right? But that is not the only battle that we're fighting right now. There's a hearts and souls battle that's going on as well, and we set up those future wins by establishing that strong base, so that there's a better Congress in the future, there are better presidents in the future who care more, and the citizens themselves end up making those calls directly to their lawmakers. Every poll I see that asks Americans about their environmental and conservation values, puts our issues like front and center. Like, people want clean air, clean water, affordable clean energy, but they don't yet have the organizing tools to voice those needs and interests to their members of Congress in such a way that we win the day on the floor. That doesn't mean losing the vote is the end of the fight. So I think you're right. Thanks for reminding us. We got to keep building that movement, building that base. There are so many things that are happening. I know you guys wanted to touch on the endangerment finding and the rollback there. It's a little understood public policy within EPA. Charlotte, can you give us the high notes about endangerment and what could happen if the federal government changes its mind about what climate change means?
Yeah, and I'll just say, I mean, this is the start of a lengthy process, and it will be litigated in courts. Groups will sue for sure. So, like, we are not the last time we're going to talk about this, but it is such an important thing that we did want to also just put it on your radar. So just give kind of a high level overview of what's going on. So the EPA made the endangerment finding following the Supreme Court's landmark decision in 2007 in Massachusetts versus the EPA that greenhouse gases are in fact air pollutants under the Clean Air Act. And given that, the EPA has an obligation to curb greenhouse gas pollution if it determines that that pollution is endangering public health and welfare by contributing to climate change. So the EPA in 2009, after a lengthy rulemaking process, came out with this, what we call the endangerment finding, which demonstrates that the buildup of heat-trapping gas, greenhouse gases, in the atmosphere does in fact endanger public health and welfare. And it has become the bedrock upon which the EPA has developed all of our essentially climate pollution reduction regulations. So EPA has used this endangerment finding to adopt rules that reduce greenhouse gas emissions from cars, from power plants, from oil and gas operations. Really, really fundamentally important to the ability of the federal government and in turn state governments to combat climate change and to require industries to reduce pollution. The Trump administration hates this. Yeah, go figure. And so they moved, they sort of hinted at doing this in the first Trump term, but didn't. This Trump term, EPA Director Zeldin moved to repeal the endangerment finding and is therefore putting at risk all of these programs and the fundamental ability of the federal government to regulate and combat climate change. Again, like I said, they have to go through a lengthy review process in order to even just hit the point of repealing the rules or the endangerment finding. And then, you know, environmental groups and others will absolutely sue over this. So it'll be, you know, finally dealt with in court. But there is that rulemaking process to repeal the endangerment finding is kicking off. So I wanted Tim to talk a little bit about sort of like upcoming public comment and public hearing opportunities so that people can weigh in and say, this is ridiculous. Obviously, climate change is endangering our public health and welfare.
Yeah, thanks, Charlotte. And I know that the one there's a couple of things. The first thing is kind of short notice, but the EPA is going to be holding a public hearing to reconsider the endangerment finding. Um, this hearing will address the proposed rescission of this finding, and so there is a hearing that is scheduled for this week. It's a multi-day hearing for public comment. It's August 19th through the 21st. With the possibility of a fourth day. I actually think the EPA added a fourth day, where people can sign up with the EPA and submit comments and speak virtually on the endangerment finding and why it's so important for the EPA to keep this. So highly consider all of you that may be interested. This is a really, really crucial policy, as Charlotte mentioned. Consider signing up to testify on how these actions will impact, our state, our region, your livelihoods. We have talking points and guidance that we'd be happy to share. I think Bo in our follow-up email will have all those resources for you all. And so I'll be actually speaking this week, and I know many Sierra Club members and staff will be as well. And so this is just one small thing you can do. The pushback is sign up to testify. And again, we'll make sure you have kind of the resources, talking points you need to do that. The other thing too, if you do not want to speak at one of these hearings, the public comment period is open and it has been extended and will now end on September 22nd of 25. So if you do not want to virtually testify and speak, you can submit comments to the EPA until the 22nd of September. And so again, this is just one small way for all of us to engage and make a difference and really show, the EPA that this is a critical policy. And so again, we'll make sure you get that piece of information in terms of sign up, talking points, and the ways to submit comment.
Well, I did want to just add one thing. I know we're short on time here too. One thing that's really important to note also in Michigan is that our Attorney General, Dana Nessel, has also been suing the Trump administration left, right, and center, which is great. And we need that sort of leadership. The AG's is termed out at the end of next year, as is our governor and our Secretary of State. And all of our seats in Michigan's legislature are also up. But in particular, this Attorney General role is really, really important. And it's critical that we have somebody who is going to stand up to the Trump administration and join these suits, because that's not something that just environmental orgs or just nonprofit orgs can do. You really need the weight of state attorneys generals behind you. And so I think that's another piece where we gotta keep an eye on state politics too, in terms of like how we're responding to Trump and who is representing us to do that work.
And I am so incredibly grateful for the Michigan League of Conservation Voters and the Sierra Club, like the attention that you all put on the politics of this. Like at the Environmental Council, we're policy centric, and yet we're impacted every day by the politics of the people, like who is there making those decisions. And I tell you what, I get voter guides from both of you all, and I pay very, very close attention to them. Thank you guys for making sure we have that intel. Last words as we close out. What should people be doing? What can they do? You've given us one important vehicle right now to put comments about the endangerment rule. What else can people be doing in this moment to strengthen the fight back?
I can kick it off. I mean, I think uh, we definitely have to educate our friends, neighbors, and family about what is going on, and because we may be really following it, all of us on this call, but not everyone is following it, and they may have heard a little bit, big beautiful bill, what does that mean? Um, and we still see polling that shows a lot of people do not know what happened with this bill that was passed. So we've got to bring it to life in different ways. I think the storytelling is the way to do that. You're already by being on this uh, webinar and listening, you're already hearing from organizations that you can pair up with. There's lots of events happening right now. There's sort of a growing Michigan resistance sort of group. Um, I would say any of our groups can provide you with like sample letters to the editor, um, with sample social media that you could put in, call scripts to call your member of Congress for the next fight, which is this funding fight for fiscal year 2026.
Right.
And as far as just Michigan LCV, we have this action hub. So michiganlcv.org/action hub. And it's supposed to be sort of one-stop shop that you can take one-click actions, find an event, and stay up on the news at the intersection of the federal and state level.
I'll say too, look, there is no world in which the state can fill the breach of federal funding cuts. And there's no world in which a lot of the organizations who were in line to get really, really critical federal funding and had that pulled back are going to be able to make those dollars up. But I think the more we can support local groups that are doing that work, the better, because there are some very real, folks from Huron, Legacy Land Conservancy are on. They just had USDA money pulled back that would have helped with conserving more land in the Washtenaw County area and Livingston County area. And again, do not expect us all to be able to make up that lack of federal funding, but I think it's just goes to show that we really do need to be stepping up individually to try to support these organizations so that they can continue to do that work, at least in part, despite the very real federal funding getting pulled.
Bentley, Tim, other things you want people to be wrapping their heads around, actions they should be taking?
I would just say, like for the Sierra Club's point of view, I mean, we host outings, educational forums, workshops. I mean, we're connecting people with nature while also equipping them with the advocacy skills. I know all of our organizations are doing it, and we're working to build up an in-district lobby program right now. And for folks, our Michigan chapter has 14 local groups across the state where you can volunteer and engage locally, and grassroots organizing, educational events, and various advocacy campaigns. And then just the one piece too, if you are a college student or a younger person too, I know with the Sierra Club, I know LCV does as well. And students and young activists can get involved in campus Sierra Club groups. We have summer fellowships, internships with the Michigan chapter too, and there's various different ways on your school's campus, even in high school, to get involved in this work. And so for folks that maybe in high school or in college that are on here too, that are looking to get involved in the advocacy work of our organizations, would love to make that connection too.
Yeah, really true. It's 7 o'clock. Bentley, Tim, Charlotte, thanks again. I am always impressed by the work that you all do, and so very, very grateful to have experts like you protecting us and keeping the fight strong. We're gonna come back at least once, twice more. There's so much to talk about here, and we'll dig in even further on specifics, but also like Bentley, I'm really curious to check in with you about the annual budget processes as well, and see if there's some light at the end of that tunnel. Great job, folks. Really appreciate it. You in the audience, thank you so much for joining us. I know it's tough to take an hour out of your perfect Michigan summer evening, but it's all for a good cause and a strong fight. So thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time on the next flood proof webinar. Take care.